evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Chris Weidenbach, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Corporal Brett Smith. We warmly welcome the family of Private Michael Doody, whose story will be told shortly. We also warmly welcome Mr. David Manolis, representing the ACT branch of the Naval Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony live across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Michael Doody. Michael Doody was born in 1890, the youngest of 8 children of Michael and Bridget Doody of Broken Hill in New South Wales. He spent most of his formative years growing up in the suburbs of Adelaide in South Australia. Known as Mick to his family and friends, he attended St Mary's Dominican Convent and School and afterwards worked as a labourer at the Islington Locomotive Works. He also spent 3 years parading with the 10th Australian Infantry Regiment before it was disbanded in the years before the war. Doody enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in October 1915. After a period of training at the Morphettville racetrack, he embarked for Egypt with a reinforcement group for the 3rd Light Horse Regiment. By the time he arrived, Australian and New Zealand troops had withdrawn from Gallipoli and were undergoing a major restructure in preparation for joining the fighting on the Western Front. Since the 3rd Light Horse Regiment was at full strength, Doody was transferred to the Light Horse Reserve Regiment and then to the artillery for posting to a gun team after further training in England. Doody spent several months on the Salisbury Plain near Wiltshire before he was again transferred, this time to the infantry. He was posted to a reinforcement group for the 32nd Battalion and sailed for France in November 1916. Doody arrived in France toward the end of the Somme campaign and met up with the 32nd Battalion as it rested behind the lines near Montauban. By this stage of the war, Australian troops were occupying a series of defensive positions between the villages of Fleur and Gerdecourt in preparation for what proved to be one of the coldest winters in 40 years. Although there was little fighting in this sector, the Germans regularly bombarded the Australian positions, while the infantry spent their time repairing trenches and overcoming endless mud, rain and frostbite, which proved to be almost greater enemies than the German army. The 32nd Battalion occupied a series of defensive positions west of the village of La Tonsloi. A trench raid was conducted in late November, and German shell fire was constant throughout December. On the 11th of December, Private Doody was killed, presumably from desultory German shell fire, as the battalion mended its trenches and did their best with contending with the mud. Aged 26 at the time, he was given a battlefield burial outside the nearby village of Le Boeuf and today rests in the nearby Guards Cemetery. He was fondly remembered in Adelaide as being of bright, happy disposition, loved and respected by a large circle of friends. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Michael Doody, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.